Hey guys, I'm Kate. Welcome back to my channel, and today might be the day that I talk the least with my hands in a video. As you guys know, I'm so want to do because I'm actually going to give them a job. Nail polish. So once upon a time, I made a video where I talked about how I was afraid to admit that I was a writer, and maybe sometimes I'm still kind of afraid, depending on the person, depending on how I'm feeling that day, whatever. And in that video, I touched briefly on how other writers were kind of the culprit occasionally for my fear, or I'll say that some writers added to that fear, right, of telling other people that I was a writer. And I want to dive into that a little bit more because Camp NaNoWriMo's coming up and I see this happen occasionally, so I just feel like discussing some things, and maybe it'll be a little bit more of a rant than a discussion, but we're gonna find out together. I'm talking about things like genre snobs, publishing gatekeepers, and all about fan fiction. And I do think that some of this can be explained in the way that we treat amateur versus professional things, and I think it's hard because as writers we're so picky about words sometimes, but just generally society uses amateur interchangeably to mean like bad or like beginner level, when really that's not what amateur always means. Like, just look at sports, you know, you have amateur sports stars versus professional sports stars, i.e. you're getting paid for it versus you're not getting paid for it. It doesn't really have any indication on caliber, and it's not negative in the way that I feel like we use amateur within the writing world. Because as writers we use it not only in a terms of like have you been published kind of way, but also in like a derogatory kind of way. And I think a great example of this, and I know it's overused, but that's because it's perfect, is Twilight. People say that's amateur writing, and I'm not here to debate Stephenie Meyer's writing style, but the point is it's not amateur because it is professional. It's published traditionally, and I want to get a little bit more into that later on in this discussion rant video. Whatever. It was read by millions, it started a career for the writer to write other series, and yet people call it amateur. So you get my point kind of, right? Like, we're not in agreement on what amateur means. And so much of what we think is amateur comes down to personal taste when we use the word amateur to mean like bad or not great or whatever synonym you want to put in there. Aha! One hand cleaned. Are the Transformer movies bad because they abandon plot lines when all they're truly meant to be is like a popcorn flick where things blow up? Is certain abstract art amateur because my dad looks at it and thinks that he could do the same thing in a half an hour? One of the first writing groups that I was a part of, most of the people in that group wrote high fantasy, but I also had a friend in the group who wrote exclusively chick lit. Was she looked down upon or thought of as like a lesser writer? Yup. And just as a tip for y'all who are looking to join writing groups, which I totally recommend, this isn't to crap on all writing groups, but try to find some that kind of focus on the genre that you're in. I talked about not using my hands, and what am I doing? It's fine. If you, like me, write in like a multitude of genres or are kind of all over the place, you can have multiple groups you're a part of. I think it's just so helpful to write with other people who are writing the same kind of thing because they'll read the same kind of thing, and it's just been my experience, but it's happened multiple times that when you have people who are in these big, giant writing groups, and when you have people writing in very diverse genres, there's gonna be some side-eyeing and eye-rolling and looking down upon others. And I know there are some people who have said that they've never had a problem with a ginormous writing group like that, or they've never had a problem when they write chick lit and all their other writer friends write high fantasy, but I think it's kind of one of those things where it's like the exception that proves the rule. So the point of this is that you have genre writers looking down on other genre writers, but then you have literary writers who look down on genre writers and then vice versa, and it's just all kind of a mess. Why do we do this to ourselves? We are literally all creating something out of nothing. I'm not saying read each other's work if you don't like that genre. I'm just saying let's not crap on another person's preference. It's really not that hard. This also leads me to discuss publishing gatekeepers. Ooh, okay. Nail polish off. I'm gonna go wash my hands real quick. Clean nails. Now, the entire landscape of self-publishing has changed within the span of like a decade. I do get that traditional publishers can kind of act as gatekeepers for quality, and I'm gonna go ahead and bring up Twilight again because tons of other people talk about its quality, and I think it makes an excellent point here. And don't at me because I did really enjoy the first Twilight book. I still have it. You will maybe have seen in other videos where I talked about this. I got rid of the rest of the series because I didn't really like the rest of the series. So, but don't come at me, okay, Twilight fans. I enjoyed the first book. I still enjoy the first book. disclaimer done. But the problem with thinking of traditional publishing as a means of distinguishing between good and bad is that it's a business, which means that houses buy books that they believe will sell. Not because something is good, but because they believe that it will be popular enough to sell however many X number of copies. We're going black. Cheap black polish. That's how I do it. Of course, I do think people in the business love books and want to help make those books the best that they can be. I'm not saying that that's not the case. I'm saying that it's a business and businesses gotta make that money. And I think another great way to exemplify this is that there are a lot of grants given out for people writing books that are more literary, or talking about topics that are important but are not as sellable. Or even across whole genres like poetry. Poetry doesn't sell as well. These kind of books benefit the most from these grants and these beneficiaries. But outside of these grants, there are a lot of books that are being written in these important but not sellable markets, or poetry, or across, you know, very specific genres. And that doesn't mean it's a marker of good or bad just because they're not being selected to be published. And that is my point. Having something traditionally published should not be the be-all end-all of whether a book is great or good or the caliber of its writing. And again, the entire landscape is changing. Some of the best-selling authors and novels of the year were self-published or indie published. This is kind of like a trending topic. This is a trending direction, but it just seems like collectively our mindset seems slow to change on this, and that's coming from someone who would ideally like to have at least one book or one series, Project Blue, traditionally published in the future. My other books or series, I think I might actually like to have indie published. So I'm trying to kind of get, you know, a balanced perspective here. And finally, I want to talk about the biggest point of contention I've seen with online communities, specifically Camp NaNoWriMo and NaNoWriMo and other, you know, various forums. And that is fanfiction real writing? Or should fanfiction count? And Nano has made like a clear distinction where they even have like a fanfiction subcategory within the forums, but you're gonna see some people not agree with that. Not like I've pretended to be unbiased in this entire video, but I'll make the disclaimer that my first introduction to writing was in Harry Potter fanfiction because I loved the Marauders and that was my jam for many years. If you write stories, you know how hard it is to write stories. You know that stories are much more than just the specific setting and the specific characters. Even if I'm writing a sequel, it's not like because I have the characters in another book, it automatically writes itself. Can you imagine though? That would be amazing. And why do we care what other people are writing? I think a lot of this can be boiled down to we need to like mind our own business, but especially amongst writers who should be lifting each other up rather than crapping on each other. And yes, there's totally designations when it comes to selling books later. I mean, we have the New York Times bestseller list, you have a myriad of awards you can possibly win for your writing, etc., etc. So I'm not saying you shouldn't feel accomplished or proud of yourself for selling your first 100th, 1000th, millionth, JK Rowling, you're hanging out here, book or whatever. All I'm saying is let's not look down on other writers for not being published the way that you want to be published, or not for writing the genres or the stories that you want to write, or read, or whatever else. Got one whole hand done because I was talking too much. Alright, that's it for my rant discussion thing. Please comment down below and let me know if you have a writing related rant that you've been wanting to get off your chest, if you've ever been looked down upon for writing in a certain genre, and if you still think of publishers as the gatekeepers for what's good. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all very soon with a new video. Bye! Why do we do this? I do get that traditional public... I do that... Oh my gosh. I do get that... Thank you guys so much.